Hello. So seriously, I just recorded like 10 minutes of video and it was not recording. So forgive me if my eyes wander to the corner of the screen as I look to make sure that the clock is still running. Thanks for tuning in, I guess is the way, I don't know, do you tune? Thanks for coming back. I wanted to start to look at my history with how I looked at my weight and how that translated into my habits with food. So I thought the best way for me to really explore this adventure is to talk about the early years versus the late years. I think that it would be easier to do it in two parts. I think two, maybe three, but probably two parts. So I just want to talk a little bit about my upbringing and how that shaped the way that I looked at food, and how it's also shaped me as a parent in the way that I manage my kids and their food intake. When I was a little girl, my parents really had two schools of thought when it came to food. There was my dad, which was the clean plate club attitude. Your plate had to be completely clean for dinner. And then there was my mom, and my mom was much more relaxed in terms of the way that she looked at food and eating. She was more of the attitude of eat what you can when you can and what you want, and as long as she had decent choices in the home, she felt that it was okay. I think that there are merits to both, and I think that there are some challenges to both of those attitudes. And as a parent, I take to a little bit of both. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a little while. I remember in kindergarten, my mom would pick me up from my very first week of school, kindergarten. And she would tell me this story for quite a few years after it had happened. But when she picked me up on my first week of school, I was sitting at the benches eating my lunch, because I was in the early kindergarten half day, and then they let us go for lunch. My mom would sit with me for an hour at a time, waiting for me to finish my lunch until we could walk home. I was a very slow, meticulous eater. I was thoughtful about it. I was always sure to chew my food really thoroughly, and I just took my time, essentially. And I think that probably was the reason why I was so thin as a kid, is that I was such a slow eater, and eating was not important to me. It was something I had to do, and it was something that kept me from playing outside. So it wasn't something that I had the patience for sometimes. As I grew up, I remember, I want to say it was third grade, possibly fourth grade. My older sister was at school with me because my parent-teacher conferences were that day. And my mom was in conference, and my sister was walking around the school with me, and there was really nobody around the school. And I don't know how it was brought up, but she made a comment saying that I was as skinny as a toothpick. And she was really trying to pay me a compliment. She didn't mean anything by it. There's no malice behind it whatsoever. She herself had struggled with her weight her entire life. She was not a thin kid the way that I was. And that compliment, though, kind of backfired. I became very aware of my small frame right then and there. And it was more of a source of disapproval than anything else. It was, for me, not a compliment. It was actually oh no. My sister, who I really idolized, she didn't accept me. She didn't like my size. It was a bad thing. So that was really the moment that I began to look at my weight and start to define myself in terms of my weight. At that point, I consciously started to eat more. I consciously tried to gain weight, and I don't know that lasted very long, but it was for a short period of time, and I ended up gaining weight. By the time I hit 5th and 6th grade, I was a chubby kid. I had a weight problem. I wasn't exercising. I wasn't as active as I was in my earlier years. So that ended up being a challenge, and it wasn't until middle school that I started getting harassed for being chubby, and it had the same impact. People weren't accepting me. I had this thing about, having acceptance from everyone and having to please everyone. So if you were unhappy with my weight, then I needed to change it. And I had really, by the time junior high hit, I had horrible eating habits. I was eating junk food. And by the time junior high came, my mom also was the primary parent by the end of my high school years. And she was a very small woman, and my younger sister she was chubby, but she was able to get smaller as she went older. She was able to control her weight, but my mom had no problem with keeping sweets in the house. And she also had an abundance of healthy stuff, fruit and vegetables. My mom loved cucumbers and that kind of stuff. So we had our choices. We could make our choices, and she allowed us that freedom. And I think that I do definitely take some of that with me in terms of how I raise my kids today. So early on, I was really aware of my weight, both when I was too thin or when I perceived I was too thin or perceived that I was too heavy. And that became a big factor for me. And it soon became less family focused and a lot more peer focused. I wanted to keep my weight down to get the attention of boys, or I wanted to be able to fit in cute clothes. These things became important to me as I got through junior high and had some challenges. And during that time, I really learned how to use food as a coping mechanism. It was a way to be social. You ate lunch with your friends. You would have snacks after school with your friends. You would stop by the convenience store on the way home and pick up a New York seltzer. All these things that socially was acceptable that I would do, and also if I was upset, I'd want to eat. And I also developed some very poor habits in other ways in terms of how I dealt with my stress. And I think that I probably early on dealt with stress a lot worse than other kids my age. So food was absolutely a factor in that. I think that's where I'll go ahead and stop. This is a good just kind of look on how I kind of twisted myself around food at an early age. And we'll talk about high school and my adult years in the second video. That's it for now. Stay tuned for the second part of this early childhood discussion, and we will be talking with you soon.